Hello and welcome from my little space here in Vienna. My name is Luise. I'm a literature student and writer, and I'm currently writing my master thesis on the topic female authorship in the Viennese Modernism, that's around 1900, and I'm focusing on the production and publication possibilities for three different authors, Rosa Mayreder, Emilie Mattheier and Else Jerusalem. And this is a very interesting perspective because it's not like a traditional literary perspective. It's more of a literary sociological perspective. And I also need to work with sociological methods. And while first doing my research, I came across Pierre Bourdieu's field theory. And I think it's very interesting. It's to a certain extent very simple, but it makes a lot of sense, and I thought it's maybe interesting to share it here and to give you an insight what it means to have a theory and a method as your base for an academic paper. So for a very long time during my bachelor and also even during my master, it was never really required to sit down and say, this is my theory, this is my method, and this is what I'm working with to dissect this special topic. And I usually just dive into the topic and just write about it, not in a very specific way. Then I started doing research on my master thesis, and I had this little master course that was accompanying you writing your thesis. And the professor was like, what's your theory? What is the foundation of your paper? And I was really like, I don't know, maybe something on gender studies and something like that. I did have a bit of an idea there, but he was like, yeah, but that's not enough. It needs more. You need tools and you need a certain vocabulary to put the things that you are dissecting into perspective, if that makes sense. And then my supervisor suggested to work with Pierre Bourdieu because it makes a lot of sense, and now that I'm working with it's really helpful. So what is the field theory, or like the literary field theory? Pierre Bourdieu was born in 1930 and lived until 2002, and in this book, for example, he writes about the field theory and explains it. It's the German title, it's Die Regeln der Kunst, Genese und Struktur des literarischen Feldes. It was published in 1992, and it's a sociological perspective on literature. It combines historical and political dimensions in a way that other theories are not able to do. The special thing about it is also that it includes the author, the work, and the institutions around it, and it's not only one perspective. So the idea, I'm trying to explain it as simple as possible. I hope I can manage. So the idea is that it's a field that is rather closed within, but it is dynamic. And there are certain hierarchies and power struggles that mark this field. This literary field includes everything that you can imagine that has something to do with literature, like production and publication, reception, all the institutions and people that are included in this. And in my master thesis, I asked the question where female writers that published around 1900, where they were positioned in this literary field. I mean, there won't be a final answer, but it will shed some light on it specifically for these three authors that I've chosen, and it's kind of an exemplification via these three women. I also hope that I'm using the right vocabularies here, because some of them I wasn't exactly sure how to translate them in English, but I hope it makes sense. If not, please just write a comment if you know that there is something different in English. Before we head into the four capitals that are really kind of the foundation of this whole theory, there is this very nice picture that Bourdieu builds with comparing it to a playground. There are general rules or a general framework. One can rough another person. Is rough the right word? I hope so. With their cards, aka with their capital. And the capitals function as like a springboard in their career and in the power play within the field. So it's like this back and forth. You have the possibility to win even if you do not have the best cards or like the best capital, but it obviously makes it a little bit harder. So this is the picture that you can compare it with. But what are the capitals? I think in English the word resources is maybe a better word, but in German it would be Kapital, so I think it's just directly translated into capitals. I think on Wikipedia it's also the word capital, if I'm not mistaken. And we all know that Wikipedia is the best source to cite. The first one is probably the most obvious one. It's the economic capital. This is basically the headstone of all the other capitals, and it contains all the financial resources that a person has. Obviously money, all the financial investment in material form as well. A key factor of Bourdieu's theory that also distances him from certain economic theories is that he does not see the economic capital as the sole driving form for social structures. So it's a very important capital and it's basically the foundation, but there are lots of other things that need to be taken into account as well, such as the next capital, the cultural capital. And here it gets a little bit more complex because this one is divided in 3 categories. The first subcategory for the cultural capital is the objectified cultural capital. It includes all material goods such as books, instruments, paintings, and this capital can be directly transformed into economic capital. Obviously the capitals coincide and it's kind of this mixture that you will see this with all of the capitals that I'm going to mention. The second subcategory is the incorporated cultural capital, and this one is bound to oneself, such as education, language, also one's upbringing, and this capital is of very high relevance in my thesis since education was not easy accessible for women in the 19th century. The incorporated cultural capital also goes hand in hand with time investment and one's own willingness to kind of invest energy. So when you learn something, it takes time and your own motivation to really make it stick. A great part of this incorporated cultural capital is also perceived subconsciously during your upbringing, which makes the background of a person and the social status of very high relevance. This form of the cultural capital is also not directly transferred into economic capital. It takes time to make it into money via, for example, teaching. And here Bourdieu opens an interesting question where he says, how can this form of capital, so closely tied to the individual, be purchased without purchasing the individual itself? And this also opens a fact that this capital sometimes comes very hidden. And yeah, I'm not going to dive deep into this, but it's a whole aspect of this incorporated cultural capital, which is very interesting, and it kind of shows how deep it can go and how many thoughts you can have on this. Okay, so to round this up, to gain success with this form of capital, one needs a certain scarcity value. For example, knowledge about a topic no one else has, which you can only gain if you have access to education beyond the average. So like nowadays, it's very normal that everyone goes to school, but it might not be possible for everyone to have a university education, and this is obviously linked to social status and economic capital. The third subcategory is the institutionalized cultural capital, and this one goes along with the incorporated cultural capital, and it means the legitimate it means the legitimation. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. It means the legitimation of one's knowledge via, for example, certificates or titles or other similar documents. And these can hold a lot of power within them. I mean, when you have a look at the country Austria, you really get a sense of that because people are very obsessed with their titles, and it's like you are someone when you have a title and when you have an academic degree, when you're a doctor, something, and people sometimes get very mad and offended when you don't include their title, like when you write them a letter or an email or something. because it has such a high status to have a title in Austria. Okay, so we had the economic capital and the cultural capital, which was divided in 3 subcategories. Now we come to the third capital, which is the social capital. And this one means the social network one needs to succeed within the field. The economic and cultural capitals are often required to build a social circle. Professional relationships fall into this category, but also like friends and family. And this capital is a bit fluid because it needs a good amount of nurturing to keep the relations up, obviously. I think that doesn't need any further explanation. It can also easily backfire when relations have a bad influence on your own status. So for female writers, in times when authorship and womanhood were kind of two opposed things, and it was not something that women were supposed to be doing as a job, these networks were incredibly important and also hold a great space in research. It's quite a big research field already, because female writers could often only publish their work with the help of male figures in their lives, like their father, their brother, their husband, or some male friend, to even get published and to get the work out, because publishers wouldn't be interested if it just said the name of a woman on it. And furthermore, the male pseudonym was one of the most common possibilities for women to be published, and this is also the case for one of the authors that I'm writing about. Her actual name is Emilie Mataya, but her pseudonym was Emile Mariot, and she published all her work under this name, and this was just a possibility to be published. And there are many stories where women had no success when they wrote down their own name, but when they submitted the work with a male pseudonym, they had a lot more chances. Last but not least, the symbolic capital. And this is the one that kind of brings all of the above together in the form of prestige and recognition. And this is showcased via literature prizes and certificates, scholarships, of course, publishing deals. But in a broader sense, it also comes through via clothes and gestures and manners. Similar to the institutionalized capital, it is all about legitimation. But the symbolic capital is far more subjective. It's about personal taste. Someone likes your work, someone else doesn't see anything in it. To give you an example to make this more clear, when you have a look at the publication of a book, the factors of the author's name, also the publisher's name, have a very great impact on how the book is perceived afterwards. It influences who reads the book and who talks about it. So before you even read the book, you see the name of the author and the publisher, and it's all about the prestige that these names might already hold. What critique is written on what platform to extend or diminish the author's prestige or the symbolic capital. This is a very cruel form of a capital. It gives you the right to exist, basically, and it can be decreased if you belong to a marginalized and stigmatized group, such as women, for example, and therefore it makes so much sense that so many women used a pseudonym back in the days. These were the different capitals, and this is all accompanied by the so-called habitus, which is the disposition that a person already brings in. So what kind of beliefs does this person have? Values, habits, and lifestyle. So this is what they bring into the field with all the different capitals, and it can obviously change. So it's this power play. It's not completely set, but it obviously determines how easy it is for you to succeed in this literary field, depending on what kind of capitals do you already bring in. Do you have a lot of money? Do you have a great network because your parents were already authors? Or in previous days, it was also a factor if you were a man or a woman. And the social status was so important because the most women that were published around the 1900s were from the Bildungsbürgertum, what's that in English? From the higher classes, because they had the time to write and also to get a certain education that working women never had, and there was also not the time and space to even sit down and write in the first place. So obviously there was nothing to publish, or I mean, it doesn't mean that it's absolutely not possible. So all of this and the theory of Pierre Bourdieu give me this kind of set of tools and vocabulary that I can use to describe the situation for these women. It also gives a great structure, and I don't know if this was interesting for you. It's very like niche information, a lot of infos that I dumped onto you, but yeah, let me know what you thought about this, if you've ever come across Pierre Bourdieu or any sociological theories. I for myself have always been very interested in cultural theories. So if you didn't know, I did a bachelor in comparative literature and one in Scandinavian studies. Scandinavian studies is still ongoing. There is one exam that I still need to do. And now I'm doing my master in Austrian studies, which is provided by the German department. And it's all about literature and culture, history, and a little bit of linguistics, mostly dialectology, but with a focus on Austria. So it's a very nice addition to my previous bachelor in comparative literature. And now I'm sitting here talking about a very specific topic, so I hope this is not driving anyone away. I've now written about half of my master thesis, and most of it was describing all of the theory parts and the historical backgrounds and all of that. So I've already written a nice chapter about Pierre Bourdieu and now I'm diving into the analysis, starting with the cultural capital and now currently focusing on the education of these women and their upbringing, basically. But I also started transcribing handwritten documents from Emily Mataya, which is absolutely amazing and very interesting. I hope to share a vlog later on about this process. So we are at the end of the video. I hope this was interesting and also made sense. I know it was a lot of information. If you are interested in the academic world, in books and literature and also writing, then I hope that you stick around a bit longer. And it is time to finish my tea and go to my little library job. I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye. What do you call it? Like now I can't think of the German word either.